Thanks for checking out this movie review video. This is for the 2022 film Talk to Me. It's an A24 film, and yes, I said 2022, but it came out in the United States in 2023, so it is eligible to be on my list for the top horror movies of 2023, which at the moment it is on there. It is quite good. It's not as great as the expectation I had for it, just because I heard a lot of people really hyping this film up. Also, the fact that I just trust A24 films for the most part at this point. So, yeah, but I still did quite like it, and obviously I'm going to talk about that, but in a no-spoiler way. This one's directed by Danny Philippou and Michael Philippou. Philippou, I don't know. However it's done. They had done the show Raka Raka. Not familiar with that one. Written by Danny Philippou as well as Bill Hinzman and Daley Pearson. Now, Daley Pearson had done some things like The Strange Call, 7 Days Later, Doodles, The Strange Chores, and interestingly enough, this is for any people out there who have children, producer for the show Bluey, which is very popular with kids, I know because of my niece. The directors for this were actually offered a DC DC Comics movie, to direct as like their first feature-length film, but they chose this instead. Good job, because this was probably more highly lauded than a DC film ever would be, unfortunately, at this point. Quick synopsis. Don't want to give too much away, obviously I never do, but it's about a girl who has gone through some trauma. This deals a lot with trauma, familial trauma in particular, which is something that gets mined by horror movies a lot. And basically she's trying to get on with her life, but things kind of keep coming back to her. And then she starts getting involved with this messed up game that her friends like to do, where they kind of use something to do dark ritual type stuff. And things start to go wrong, obviously, because this is a horror film. That's all I'm going to say right there. You do find out very early on, like, what dark ritual aspect things are going on, and it'll feel very familiar to people. Although I think they kind of put enough of a new spin on it. It fits into a bit of like a subgenre of horror I'm typically not very much into, but thankfully enough, they did this in a different enough and interesting enough way that I was into it. That I'm like, oh, okay, this is part of that subgenre that I'm actually down with, so cool. The opening sequence really grabs your attention and makes you want to know the backstory on why what happened. Pretty intense, too. It's a very attention-grabbing way to start the film. And that's something that a lot of horror films in particular do these days, where they kind of give you the pre-title screen sequence that's supposed to, like, really get your attention and be like, are you interested at this point? And I do think this one does a pretty good job of that. There's a scene early on that's hard to watch because it involves an animal. I'm going to say that. That is the only scene that has something like that. But for people who are very sensitive to that stuff, just know that that is in there. Obviously, it's not a real animal, but still, I know people seeing animals in tough situations, in peril, whatever, it can be very hard. So, trigger warning, basically. Just letting people know. It was hard for me to watch it, too, by the way. The characters are well written and also very well acted, which helps make them and their relationships feel extremely realistic. You could see every single one of these characters being an actual person in real life because they have good depth to them for the most part. Now, obviously, not every character is going to have a lot of depth because there are plenty of characters who are kind of just, I don't want to say quite stock characters, but they're just kind of there to help move some things along and introduce some aspects to the story. But the characters who matter the most, I think they have good depth. I think they're fleshed out pretty well. And I think a lot of them are very, you can really connect with them. So, yeah. The incorporation of music is done very well. Now, the score itself is well done, and I don't think they go too ridiculous with it, like cranking it up to 11 frequently. So I like that aspect of it. But also the incorporation of music, what I mean when I say that is like popular music, like known music that wasn't made specifically for this movie. They have a few of those types of songs. I think they're integrated really well. Some of them in a very fun, interesting way, and some of them in a bit more of like an emotional, interesting way. So they did a nice job with that. It looks good. Much like with pretty much any A24 film, it looks really polished. It looks so sleek and smooth and interesting. Great camera work, very smooth. None of that like shaky cam that ends up happening with a lot of these horror movies this day, like unnecessary shaky cam. So it's great shot selection, great camera movements, interesting shot framing that ends up going on here. You can tell directing is really good. Cinematography is really good. A lot of the technical stuff with this movie is very, very, very well done. So I'm not going to give it like the highest mark star-wise, so where it does lack a little bit for me is typically with story and the script itself. Still a pretty good script, but there are a few small issues with it. There are a lot of scenes in low lighting or in darkness, but you can see what you really need to in those scenes. This is one of my big things that I kind of talk about that a lot of people, not necessarily a lot of people care about, but for me, there's nothing more enraging when I'm watching a horror movie than when it's in the dark and you cannot see anything. Because at that point, it's kind of like, what are we even doing here? Why are you even trying to show me anything? Because I can't see anything. So this one, they do a great job with their lighting. They knew exactly what they were doing. Even when it's dark, even when it's low lighting, you can see everything you want to see. So those are the types of things I want to see in horror films. Proper lighting. It means a lot, at least to me it does. When things in this film do kick into high gear, it is in gruesome fashion. There is some gruesome stuff in this movie, so that will endear itself to the gore hounds out there. There's some intense stuff having to do with that gruesome stuff, a good amount of blood that ends up being shed in this movie, so you have that to look forward to if that's your thing, which, I'm never going to complain about it. I'm that type of person with these films. But just know, once it kicks up, it really lets you know we are kicking things up right now. So, pretty good. It has really good pacing to a certain point. And then it starts to feel like it gets stuck and becomes kind of repetitive, unfortunately. This is what I was talking about with my issues spawning from the script itself. The story hits the ground running in the beginning. It's going at a really nice pace. And then it hits a certain point, probably, I don't know, like between 30 and 45 minutes in. And it's only like an hour and a half movie, so it's not going to take you a lot of time. But between 30 and 45 minutes in, it really starts to slow down. And it feels like they kind of don't know where they're trying to go with the story at that point. Well, they do have an idea, but they just don't know how to progress it at a good pace at that point. So they have scenes that start to feel kind of repetitive. They're talking about the same stuff. They're dealing with the same stuff and not really introducing anything new that's adding anything to the overall story, unfortunately. Now, that said, it does get unstuck at the end of the film, probably within the last 20 minutes-ish. I think it starts to feel like that pace picks back up. So basically, in the middle of the film, it really does slow down, unfortunately. I would rate this film a lot higher if it had really good pacing all the way through, but it just does not. And that repetitive nature of the story just kind of grates on me during that middle section. The very last scene is interesting. I liked how they did that. I think it was a very... it's one of those moments that people are going to see and be like, oh, okay. People will really like the ending. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people have been responding to when they say that they love this film, that it's so amazing, is they're basing a lot of that off of the feeling that they're getting from that final scene. And it is a good scene. It's quite good. But in the context of the entire movie, this isn't like a phenomenal movie. It's quite good, though. And that'll be reflected in my rating. Sorry about that. There is an aspect of this movie that puts on display our voyeuristic society that's looking for entertainment in everything, even perilous and tragic events. It is kind of this, like, mirror to society watching things unfold in this movie where you're kind of like, oh, that's messed up, that's disgusting. And then you're like, But that's kind of where our society is a little bit, and that's pretty messed up, and it's unsettling, and yeah. But that's not the main crux of the movie, though. That is an aspect that's at play in the movie, and I appreciate that they did that, kind of hold this mirror up and be like, are you involved in this, people? You might be. Again, it deals in trauma and loss and how that can make a person's life spin out of control. It's all about how people deal with things, and a lot of the times it's hard for people to figure out how they need to deal with things. Until you go through trauma, until you go through loss, you really don't have a set plan on how you're going to deal with it, how you're going to work through it. So everyone just has to figure things out as they go, and I think this film does a pretty good job of kind of putting that on display and kind of diving deep into it. Again, it's something that's been in a lot of horror films before. It's not super unique, but it does it in its own little way, and I do appreciate it for that. So out of 5 stars with half stars in play, I'm going to give it a very good 3.5-star rating. I think if the pacing was a little bit better, I would knock that up to 4 easily. I did think about maybe giving it 4, but it's just not there. 3.5 stars. But this is where I'd love to hear your opinions on Talk to Me. Go ahead and put it in the comments. Did you love it, hate it, in between on it? And just give me like a sentence or two letting me know why. Also, please do me a favor. Like this video, like any of my videos that I do. That does help me out with getting more views on them. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Would love you to join this nerdy horror community that I'm working on here, which I literally started this channel because there aren't that many people I can really reliably talk to about horror movies, just my buddy Rich. My best bud Rich, he's the only guy I can talk horror with. In depth, in a nerdy way, basically. Everyone else where I live, no interest for the most part, or what they know about horror is very surface level. So that's why I created this, to reach out and find you other people out there who are into this stuff. But anyway, so subscribe and also hit the notification bell button, because then you know when I'm putting up new videos. But regardless, thank you so much for checking this out. I always do appreciate it when people gift me their time and actually pay attention to what I'm doing. It is a humbling experience, but thank you. I do appreciate that. But until next time, keep it brutal.